Hello everyone and welcome to the second event in our month-long Mind Your Mind campaign focused on chef mental health. This is a Chef Network webinar in partnership with BWG Foodservice. Today's event is a panel discussion on minding my mental health. We have a stellar lineup of panelists on today's webinar. We're joined by Barry Ralph, Chef Proprietor of House of Plates, Castlebar, Paula Stakelum, Executive Pastry Chef at Ashford Castle, Eilis Davenport, Pastry Chef at La Patissiere Island, Michelle Crehan, Chef Owner at The Kitchen Galway, and Eric Matthews, Head Chef of Chapter 1 Restaurant. Today's session will last approximately 1 hour. All attendees will be automatically muted throughout the session. We will have time for questions at the end of the webinar, and if at any time during the session you would like to submit a question, this can be done via the questions function in your toolbar. We will then ask any audience questions to the panel during the Q&A session. Ruth Hegarty from Chef Network will be our moderator in today's session. I will now pass you over to Sylvester Barrett from our partners BWG Foodservice for a quick welcome message.
Thank you, Rebecca. Good morning, everyone. Sylvester Barrett is my name. I'm the Sales Manager with BWG Foodservice. BWG Foods are proud to be associated with Chef Network and delighted to partner today's webinar topic, Mind Your Mind, Minding Your Mental Health. I'd like now to pass you over to Ruth Hegarty of Chef Network to begin today's session. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome everyone. Thank you, Rebecca and Sylvester. So as Rebecca said, we have 5 chefs that we're going to be speaking to this morning on the topic of mental health and how they've looked after their own mental health and their experiences in the industry. We're going to speak to each of them individually for a few minutes, and then we will come to a Q&A at the end with the full panel. And as Rebecca said, if you do want to ask questions to any of the panel, please do so in the question function, and we'll come to them around the last kind of 20 minutes of our hour-long webinar. So the first person that I am going to speak to is Barry Ralph, Chef Proprietor of House of Plates in Castlebar. So Barry, if you want to turn on your camera and microphone and join me on screen. Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good to see you. So Barry, it's been some year. Will you give us maybe just really quickly a brief picture of since last March, what's been happening for you and where things are at for you now?
Okay, so basically running a busy restaurant, having 3 kids, I never stop. So you can imagine your head is, I describe it like a washing machine sometimes. It's just constantly going round and round and round, and it's very hard to switch off. So I suppose when March came, everything just stopped. There was no emails, there was no phone calls, there was no staff, there was no orders, there was nothing. And it was feckin' great. I loved it. Suddenly I had time that I never had time before. I know this might sound a bit mad, but I actually got to know my children, to know their personalities and stuff. Like at this stage, Nora was just gone 4, June was 1.5 years, and Rihanna was 16. So to get to reconnect with them was great. We started a little food blog called Nora on Food on Facebook and on Instagram. And it was all about cooking and growing and foraging. And, you know, we initially had great success with it. She was featured on BuzzFeed's Tasty Junior in the US, getting 1.3 million views on one of her videos. We cooked live with Alan Hughes on Ireland AM. We got 2 book deals. We got offered a weekly slot on Ireland AM. She got offered a presenter's role on RTE Junior. It was just amazing, but we actually just said no to a lot of it. She was feeling a bit agitated going to town. People were recognizing her in supermarkets and stuff like that, coming up to her. And she just said to me, I don't want to do it anymore. So we stopped the whole Nora on Food because she just felt, you know what I mean, the pressure from that, even without, you know, saying it. So we made our first video yesterday since March, because she just came to me there a day or two ago, and she said that she'd like to make a new video. So we said, fine, like, you know, we were always cooking at home anyway and stuff. So we made our first video since we done March, April, May, I suppose since May. And like, even just since we put it out, I put it live last night at about 10 o'clock, and it's already got 10,000 views like on it. Like, you know, she's a massive following in the US. Just crazy, yeah, the reaction that we got from it. But I suppose
it's an incredible story, but it's also amazing to hear. I didn't realise that Nora had kind of stopped doing it, or that she had decided. And it's kind of incredible when you think that a child kind of maybe has enough self-awareness, nearly more than an adult would, not to get caught up in it all and actually just go, no, I'm not enjoying this anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know, we could see, you know, we never wanted to push her into it. People used to say to us, like, are you doing one video a week or whatever? And no, like, we just done one whenever we felt like it. There was no, you know, set thing. You know, if we decided to cook and we didn't want to make a video, we didn't make a video. Now, an awful lot of our videos too, they're not just cooking videos. We built a veggie patch out the garden when lockdown came in March. So an awful lot of it is about growing food. We have, like, one of our biggest viewing videos is on foraging, where, you know, we go up the back of the house. She identifies wild foods. She teaches her younger sister June, who's a year and a half, about the wild foods, and explains all about the flavors and stuff. And then they might go back into the kitchen and make something with the wild foods or that. You know, like, foraging would have been a big thing, and I suppose a lot of people were very interested in that, because there wasn't many good food blogs for foraging, you know, to identifying wild foods. They say we can go up the back of our house within 5 minutes. You know, we can get between 30 and 40 wild foods that people actually don't know. So it was great.
So Barry, you didn't really, I mean, you said everything stopped in March, but then it sounds like you were super busy. You didn't really stand still at all.
Yeah, it stopped with regards to the restaurant, but it didn't stop with regards home life, you know. Like, I couldn't be one for just sitting in a house and doing nothing, you know what I mean? I had to sort of do something, you know what I mean? And we just gave the first video that we done was just a simple soup video. We put her up making a butter and a squash and sweet potato soup. She chopped a few vegetables, she threw it into a pot. And I remember saying to Helen, you know, it's amazing, she's after getting 1,000 views, and within 24 hours she had 85,000 views, you know. So you know, it was just crazy, like, you know, the way it went. But all the time while this was happening, it was still going on at the back of my head, like, you know what I mean? I have to try and save my business. So it was grand having all this as a distraction to reality and all, and what was going on. But I suppose looking at House of Plates and the concept that we had for 4 years was small and sharing plates. And there was a big no-no with regards, you know, the tapas style eating and sharing plates. So I said, I'm not giving up. I've put too much into this, like, you know, for the last 4 years, you know, working 70 hours a week, 7 days a week, you know, to just say, that's it now, feck it, like, you know. So I wanted to, you know, to protect the business, to protect the jobs for the staff. So we went about, and I developed, just looking at the market and seeing what was missing in our area in Castlebar, and saying, you know, there was no good quality takeaway, you know, doing good food. So, you know, I would have spent a lot of time on, I suppose, getting packaging and different bits like that, creating menus at home, you know, recipe testing, things like that. And we launched the takeaway then on the 25th of June. So we got a grant for a trading online voucher, which enabled us to get an online ordering system called Touch Takeaway in place. So initially, I would have thought that we could have done maybe, you know, I didn't know. None of us had ever worked in a takeaway before. We didn't know the volumes involved. So initially, I thought we could have done like maybe 10 orders every 10 minutes, which was absolutely crazy. Like the first weekend, we done 138 orders. There could have been 12 or 14 items on an order. You know, it was absolute suicide. Like, you know what I mean? It was fucking mental stuff. But, you know, we got through it. The team adjusted. You know, the team, we've worked the whole way through this. I've kept a full team of 10 full-time staff right up to today. You know, so we're plugging along the whole time, and we're making it work. You know, we've changed the restaurant.
And in terms of the environment, like coming back into the kitchen and bringing your team back, how did it feel, you know, coming back in June, I suppose after being away, and then with the whole atmosphere of kind of dealing with COVID and everything? Was that hard? And then obviously the pressure of the learning curve of doing something quite new.
Yeah, it was, because everybody's looking at you because they think you've got all the answers, you know, and sometimes you don't, you know what I mean? So I suppose I've got Stephanie working with me. She's with me now 15 years, you know, she's been my sous chef for the last 12. Um, you know, so it's great to always have her, have a buddy at work, you know, that she can bang your ideas off. Same way with Owen and Marty front of house. They're with me from day one. They're with me 5 years now. So, you know, that's the core group, you know, the four of us. So we sort of, you know, it's good to have someone there that you can actually bang the ideas off. So it's all trial and error, like, you know what I mean? And coming back with all the procedures we had to have in place, you know what I mean? Going through the, you know, the front of house saying, lads, everyone is going to be watching you. Make sure you sanitize everything. You know, we put procedures in place. You know, the eyes of the world are on you when you're on that floor, because they're just waiting for you to fuck up so they can spot it, you know? So that was a tough thing, you know?
Yeah, and I think you could sense a little bit. I have to say I haven't eaten in very many places over the period of time that they were open in between, but I think you could sense a bit of that, the tension that people felt, you know, that staff felt in terms of that. But I'm wondering, like, I know you've had a lot of your team have worked with you for a long time, and do you think that the relationship that you've built up and the way that you've worked with your staff over the years kind of really helped and paid off in terms of that pressurized period coming back in after the pandemic?
Yeah, like, you know what I mean? Your staff have to be able to trust you, like, you know what I mean? And I think my staff do trust me, you know? I don't bullshit them. I say it the way it is. You know, we're going back in here, lads. You know, we lay our menu out, we cost it. We've 30% food costing. I said, I'm spending 30% on labor. These are numbers that I have to stick by, because if I don't stick by these, we're protecting nobody's job. So if one of the guys said to me, we need another chef, you can't get it out quick enough. I said, we don't need another chef. We need another pair of hands just to wrap burgers, you know? It's simple things like that, you know? Like, they have to be able to trust me, as in, like, I'm sort of the father figure off the kitchen. So they're coming to me with all the questions, you know? I have to have all the answers. Sometimes I don't. You know what I mean? And I do feel a lot of pressure. You know, the pressure is on you all the time to make this work, to protect their jobs, to make them feel safe, and to deliver a quality product at the same time, you know?
Yeah, and how do you deal with that pressure? Like, is there anything that you've learned about yourself over the years, or through what has happened recently, and like how you do deal with pressure, or how best to deal with pressure?
Yeah, I suppose, like, looking back, even when I started chefing, like, you know, I would have went into big teams of 25, 30 chefs, you know, big hotels. And I suppose when you're starting off, you know, there's always that rat pack in the kitchen, you know what I mean? The junior sous, the chef de parties, and these are the guys who, you know, who rule the roost, not necessarily the head chef or the sous chef. These are the guys you want to get in with. These are the guys you want to impress, because these are the guys that's working right beside you every day, you know. And I suppose they either love you or they hate you, and that's the way it is. You know, but you have to get in. You have to get into that group if you want to make it in that team. And I suppose that's where it's tough, and that's where a lot of younger chefs would have fell off over the years. They weren't willing to take the shit, like, you know. But I suppose you just have to put your head down, work hard to be accepted. You know, alcohol abuse was massive. You either went out with the boys at night or you didn't. If you didn't go out with them, you weren't in the gang. You weren't going to make it in that team. This is the way it was 20, 22 years ago. You know, and I just thought this was normal, you know. So I suppose normal for me was working 50, 60 hours a week, drinking 3-4 nights a week. This is the way we rocked. We were rock stars. This is the mentality that had been put into me as a young chef from my older chefs. You know, just is the way that we rolled. You know, and I suppose it wasn't until I had my daughter Rihanna, I had her at 22, that I could step back from that. I couldn't be out anymore with the boys all the time. You know, the pressures wasn't there, but I seen a lot of my mates would have continued doing that. And I remember, I suppose around the same time as Rihanna was born, one of my friends tried to commit suicide. He developed a serious drug problem. And it sort of opened up my eyes to, I suppose, the whole mental health thing. Like, if you go back, you know, Rihanna's what, 17 now. So you go back 17 years ago, like, you know, mental health wasn't talked about. You know, nobody mentioned it. You know, this is only all came to the fore in the last couple of years, well, from my experience anyway. And I suppose when Rihanna was born, I was 22. I was in a relationship. The relationship was awful toxic. I stayed in that relationship for 5 years for the sake of Rihanna, because I thought that's what I had to do. I bought a house at 26 because people told me that's what I had to do. Didn't want a house. Suddenly I had a big mortgage around my neck. I was single. And I suppose I just felt like, you know, I was caught in a trap as such. So I ended up taking, sous chef, head chef jobs at a very young age because I needed to, get money. But I say fast forward 10 years, I'm now in a job that I didn't like. I was just cooking food for the sake of cooking food. And I remember one time going on a stag, and I came back off a stag after a 2-day bender, and I remember I couldn't even get out of bed. I was lying there, I had the covers over my head, just pure. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I remember going, I can't get oxygen into my body. I didn't know what was happening. I often found if I went on a bender, the second day I was hungover and I was depressed for 4 days after it. This had to stop. So I remember saying it to my sister, and she suggested, do a bit of exercise. You'll feel great. I remember I bought a bike, went for a cycle, and I thought, yeah, this is brilliant. You know what I mean? And then after, I suppose, a year doing a bit of running, doing 5Ks, 10Ks. I remember standing at the start line of my first 5K, nervous. I had never done exercise in school, going, how am I going to do this? I'm going to look stupid running. People are going to laugh at me. You know what I mean? The way I run, but it was all in my head, And before long, I knew I was doing triathlons, duathlons. I was doing gale force. I was doing 8-hour adventure races. I was eating better. I was sleeping better. I had more energy. I felt great, to be honest with you. But there was one thing then when I went back to work, I wasn't happy. And I wasn't till I went to sort of Food on the Edge, and the first ever Food on the Edge it was. And I thought, you know what, this is brilliant. Like, you know what I mean? This is what I want to do. I'm getting out of this kitchen. I'm opening my own restaurant. I remember going home and saying it to Helen, and she totally encouraged me. She thought it'd be a great idea. So, we got married. Then Nora was born. And I suppose when I was at work, then the whole pressure at work was still there because everybody's looking at you for the answers. I done everything myself. I done all the office work. I was the head chef. I done everything. So at the beginning, I didn't have the budget to spend on a team. So I had to, you have to do these things. And just anyone out there who's looking to open their own business, you're going to work 100 hours a week, 7 days a week. There's no way around that because you will not have the money starting off because you're constantly investing into equipment. You're constantly investing into people to make your team better. But the way I found was for me to get a little break during the day out of the kitchen, I put in a tunnel out the back of the restaurant and built an urban farm. So if I was doing a split, so I went at 9, the guys would come in at 2, I'd go out the back, I do a bit of weeding between 2 and 5, set a few seeds, la-di-da, this is great. It was just a bit of headspace. It was just, time to breathe. And even on my days off, I suppose, just going foraging with the girls, it was my way of spending some time with them and also teaching them a few bits, even long before Nora on food. This is going back 4 years ago. So I didn't have time anymore for the adventure racing or for, the 8-hour endurance races or anything like that, where foraging became my new headspace. So I love nothing more than, going for a walk somewhere new, just identifying wild foods, bringing them back to the kitchen, showing the guys, asking them what to think of the flavors, you know what I mean? And just, that's where I'm at the minute,
Brilliant, Barry. Yeah, I suppose it's like, exercise or gardening or spending time with kids, just anything that really kind of takes you out of your own head. And as you said, the kind of constant noise that's going on. So thanks a million, Barry. That's fantastic. We'll look forward to coming back to you later on in the discussion. So I'm going to go to Paula Stakelum next. So Paula, if you want to switch on your camera and microphone. Hi, Paula.
Hi, how are you?
So Paula, good. How are you today?
Good. The weather's better today anyway.
It is. It's looking up now. The sky's blue. So Paula, you're the executive pastry chef at Ashford Castle. You work at a pretty high level, and I think it's fair to say that you're known as being one of the best pastry chefs in the country for sure. And you've got a fairly big team that you manage there. So I suppose over your years in the industry, have you faced personal challenges in terms of mental health and your own wellness and I suppose your mindset in your career?
Yeah, I guess I definitely have. I took the job at Ashford Castle 10 years ago this year, actually. I was quite young taking the pastry chef job. I think it's, now looking back it was. And I just went head straight into it. I was lucky at the time. I worked with Stefan, who was executive chef, and he fairly guided me along the way. you know, looking back then on the pastry chef I am now, obviously I'm always very hard on myself. You know, I'd say, was I ready for the position? You know, did I have the experience? Obviously I didn't, but I did it anyway. And I guess it's just been a massive learning along the way. And over the last couple of years, really, I've only really come into my own learning that, you know, it's not just about being a pastry chef and creating these amazing dishes, that it's about the team and the team you have behind you. And that's what makes you the pastry chef, rather than all the dishes. That it's, you know, now I find it's like, it's not half and half. It's more like, I'd say 60% being a good leader and being a good person in the kitchen rather than what you actually create, really.
Yeah, and do you think that's somewhere that maybe some chefs fall down? Because I think you can get to quite a high level in the industry by like pure culinary talent and creativity, but maybe no one really teaches you the skills in terms of taking care of people, and that's why sometimes the culture at the top maybe.
You know, they don't teach you that in college, definitely not. They don't tell you. Maybe they do now, but back in my time they didn't. And I didn't even know myself until, you know, I was very lucky to have people around me who, my GM and Philippe, now our executive chef, who, you know, said, you know, gave me advice and, you know, really showed me the way to go. So, you know, I'm quite lucky in that respect that I have that support at the castle. And yeah.
And what were some of the kind of issues that you faced in terms of managing people or managing yourself, I suppose?
But, you know, I thought that, you know, I could do everything, which I 100% can't, you know, and if a situation arose, I would try to do it myself, which I know now I couldn't do for all the world. I guess, you know, when you can't do anything without your team around you, really, is the bottom line. And sorry, now the dog is barking in the background.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and do you think that a lot of the kind of pressure came from yourself?
Yeah, I give myself pressure. You know, I'm kind of the person who, when I create something that, you know, at that moment I think it's really good and I like it, and we go with that. And then I could be very, very hard on myself a couple of days later, a couple of weeks later, and say, you know what, that's not really good enough, and we have to get it better. I suppose it's the strive for getting perfection or getting excellence, and, you know, but I don't think that's a bad thing either. You know, you don't want to always stand still and say, okay, we did this, it's really good. We can always do better. Like, you know, I'd say now during lockdown, I've been making the same loaf of bread for the last 2 weeks. You know, yeah, it's perfect, but I know myself it can be like exceptional. And, you know, working in a 5-star environment, you get to expect that. You know, they expect it to be better than they can have anywhere in the world. So yeah, I'm half and half my own. I don't know how you say it.
Yeah, and so how do you balance that, or how have you learned to kind of cope with that? That there is the pressure that you put on yourself, and there's also that real expectation to perform at a really high level and to turn out something that is of the highest standard, and yet also you need to kind of find a balance and maybe a reality check sometimes as well around it.
Yeah, you definitely do. I think really, since COVID happened, you know, it's only really then I realized the value of having time off and time to myself and being fully present when I'm at work, and also being fully present when I'm off as well. And it's more the time having off really stands to me when I go to work, if that kind of makes sense. You know, I always was like liked walking, running, cycling, kind of like that, but mostly over the last couple of months, I really started making sure that I do run every day. At the start of December, I was challenged to do 5K every day. At the start, I was like, God, I'll never get up every morning and do it every single day. But I did. And it's that kind of one thing in the morning that I can control myself, that it's my decision to get up and go running. And when I come back into the kitchen, that I know myself, I'm a total different person. My headspace is clear and I'm ready really to take on anything. I know, and that really, really helps, you know, that time outside and the time alone outside in the morning is quite good for me. You know, because you're surrounded by people all day long, you know, And from the minute you walk into the kitchen in the morning, somebody wants you for something. It's like they have a camera and they know you're in, so they're going to come looking for something.
Yeah, and do you think that time to yourself and that exercise makes you a better manager and a better team leader?
It does. I'm way more patient. You know, if there's a reaction to a situation, I can find myself now having more empathy for people, because, you know, I know that it's not just the situation 9 times out of 10. It could be something going on at home, and now you add COVID to it as well, so the situation is 10 times worse, and it's probably actually nothing, you know, when the person steps back and says, oh yeah, yesterday I was a bit, but it was just the way it is. Whereas now I take more time to manage them situations better, I suppose.
And just briefly, when we spoke, you talked about being the experience of when you did close initially, when COVID hit, and what that was like, and then also what it felt like coming back into the kitchen with your team. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I suppose we went back in July and August. End of July, August. Like everything changed. All the operations in the hotel, all the outlets were reduced capacity. We didn't have breakfast buffet. We didn't have petit four trolleys. You know, I think everything in the pastry absolutely changed. And we talked about it. You know, everybody knew what was happening, but I guess I didn't prepare for myself. I was able to walk back into the kitchen and be at 100% again. That was no problem for me, but I didn't prepare that my team wouldn't get back to 100% straight away. And it took them quite some time, and add wearing a face mask and COVID and fears and anxiety to it, you know, it was a big challenge the first couple of months. Yeah, but I guess then when we went to the second lockdown, we didn't close fully. We did a little bit of takeaway, and Pastry were preparing for Christmas. So that gave us the time then to build the team, build resilience, and build momentum in people. You know, when you can go from being at home every day, 7 days a week, to suddenly back into the 5-star environment, it's not an easy challenge for everybody, which I realized. And so then when we went back into Christmas, we were ready to roll, and we had a really good Christmas then. And I think the time with the team really stood to us, you know.
Brilliant. Yeah. Thank you so much, Paula. And we'll see you again later as well. So thanks a million for chatting to me. And next we're going to speak to Eilis Davenport. So Eilis, if you want to join me. And Eilis is also a pastry chef. Hi Eilis, and Eilis works with Le Patissier. So Eilis, again, you've worked at a very high level in the industry, worked in fine dining restaurants. You've been on maternity leave since March, so I suppose on a professional level, you've maybe been somewhat cushioned from the impact of COVID-19 up to now, and you're due to go back to work this week. But I suppose leaving aside kind of the current period and the COVID-19 situation, just in terms of your own experience as a chef, like Paula was talking about there, I suppose, are there times that you've felt a lot of pressure, and are there times that your work as a chef has impacted on your mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. So at the moment, because I've been at home for the past 9 months, I've been very, very busy with a little person, and I haven't been in the kitchen. But previous, when I was younger, I'm talking maybe 6 or 7 years ago now, I did have a dark time impacted by the work in the kitchen. I wouldn't say it was directly impacted by an individual or anyone, but my own self-talk would have impacted my mental health big time. So, like as Paula was saying a couple of minutes ago, she was saying, and I listened carefully to her, about always striving for improvement or for perfection, or if you're coming up with a dish or you're coming up with a plate and you're like, okay, that could be better. You know, it could always be better. And I got to a point in like a time where nothing was good enough. Everything I was creating, now looking back now, I'm like, that was some really, really good stuff. But at the time, nothing was good enough, and I couldn't convince myself that I was like at a high enough level in my career. Excuse me. And I went into a really, really dark place mentally, and in turn, I had to go and I sought professional help. I went to a counsellor for the best part of a year. The good guts of 6 months, I was in a counsellor's chair every week, once a week, until I felt ready enough to be able to cope with the challenges faced in the industry by myself. And I think that anyone, if they are suffering or they're in a dark place, to really reach out and seek that help, because it is there. And it's the best thing I ever did, was go and get that help for myself. And looking back now, I'm equipped with tools to be able to go forward, and I'm in a really good position, mental, with like a really, really good mental resilience now, mental strength. And I think that stands to me over anything else in my career so far.
And it's really quite amazing that you did go and get that help. And this, I think, from when we were talking this about 7 years ago, and as others have said, there hasn't been a huge amount of like talk about mental health in the industry until quite recently.
Yeah.
So it's amazing that you were able to reach that point of deciding that you needed to go and get help.
Yeah, well as that, there was in my family as well, there's a lot of hereditary mental illness and things like that, and chemical imbalance. So it's something I've been aware of since I was 12, 13, 14. I knew I had witnessed a couple of things growing up. So I think when it came to that point for me and it came to a head, I was like, no, I know one road. I've seen devastating consequences on one road. I don't want that to be me. And I think that was the deciding moment for me, where I said, no, I need to go and see my GP and get a plan in place. And that's what I did. And I'm like, now I find it easier to talk about, whereas before I wouldn't have.
That's brilliant, yeah. And I mean, like, if you, I suppose, as a chef, if you had like a problem with your shoulder or something, you'd go see a physiotherapist and sort it out, because it would be impacting your work and your life. So why not do the same if you've got problems in terms of mental wellness? Absolutely. So that's brilliant. Yeah. And I suppose I was going to ask you. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that like there's charities out there that are doing amazing work. It doesn't have to be expensive. If there is someone who doesn't have like the money to go privately, like look at the likes of Jigsaw for young people. They're amazing. I did use them myself on a first-hand experience. They were phenomenal. They really were. And P8 House as well are an absolutely amazing charity. So if there is anyone listening that needs, to use the resources, go and use them, because they're absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, thanks, Eilis. I think that's a really important point to make, because affordability isn't a barrier, doesn't need to be a barrier. There's a lot of community counselling services that are based on how much you can afford to pay, or free counselling services, and so yeah, that's really important. And I suppose just very, very briefly, because it's so interesting to talk to everybody. I'm going to spend too long with each person, but I think you spoke about a lot of the pressure was coming from yourself, and as much as we hear a lot about kind of bullying and shouting in kitchens and that kind of thing, I think chefs can put themselves under a lot of pressure. But do you think that is also somewhat perpetuated from the top, or I suppose how can head chefs make sure that younger chefs are not putting themselves in that mindset?
Yeah, I think it's very important to kind of open the conversation in the kitchen. I mean, I've spoke to my teammates and my head chef about it, as an open conversation in the kitchen. It's not something where you have to go into the office and it has to be confidential. And if you want that to be, I think as a leader, you need to make sure your door is open and you're approachable as a chef, to be able to give that space to somebody if they need it. Or not only that, like if you're in one day and you can see someone, it doesn't matter if they're above or below, or like as I see it, everyone's on the same level when it comes to mental health. Like if someone's having a down day or they're a little bit quieter than normal, like go over and just say like are you all right? Like, do you want to go and have a chat? Or is everything all right? I think it's very important. And like maybe they won't want to talk, but if you at least open the door and put that option there, you might be able to help them. It's very important.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Eilis. And I know also that you wrote a blog for Chef Network a while back, which we're kind of re-promoting at the moment during the Mind Your Mind month, about trying to achieve work-life balance as a chef, which is another obviously hugely important thing in terms of mental health. So would recommend people to check that out as well. So thanks a million, Eilis. We'll come back to you again shortly. And next, I am going to speak to Michelle. And just a reminder, if you want to ask any questions, to put them into the question function, and hopefully we'll try and get time for a few of those with all of the panel at the end. And if you want to direct it to someone in particular, feel free to mention that in your question. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Lovely to see you all this morning.
Yeah, so Michelle, you are the chef proprietor of The Kitchen in the museum in Galway and Marmalade Bakery. So I suppose coming back to where we are at the moment and the whole COVID-19 pandemic and the experience of the past year, it's been a pretty rough ride for everyone. But I suppose tell us what that's all been like for you, and what you've gone through in terms of your businesses and what you've gone through kind of personally as well.
I suppose the first thing is we closed The Kitchen on, I actually just checked on my diary, it was the 13th of March last year, it's actually 10 months since yesterday, really, when you look at it. I mean, it's crazy when you think about it, but we kind of saw the wave of Corona coming, quickly over from Asia. It was coming through Europe, had kind of devastated Italy, and because the museum obviously is a government building, we were always going to be one of the first that would be closed down, because we were kind of working at the behest of the Galway City Council. So kind of when the call was made, and you have to shut your doors, So we let everybody was basically let go with a letter saying, the announcement was made by the government, I think, the following week about the PUP and all that kind of thing. So that was amazing. I think that the government should be lauded actually for that, for startup, because as an employer, it took a huge amount of pressure off us that regards worrying about the people that we work with, because we care about them, and I was, would have been panicked. How are they going to survive? And like, I wouldn't have been able to keep paying wages if the doors are closed. You can only pay the wages if there's money coming in, the tail from customers. So being able for the staff to go off on PUP was good, really. It helped a lot. Now with the bakery, it was a very young business. Like, we were only there from the previous May, and I knew that people would need bread, so I kind of felt like that was something we could try to keep going. So the main bread baker, Derek, a Polish gentleman, he insisted then that he would be working completely on his own. He was a bit nervous about being around people. So that what we did was we basically scrapped everything, scrapped all the timetables, scrapped everything, and just reconfigured the whole working module. We reduced our days opening, and basically my daughter had been living in Washington DC. She was going to college over there, and she had returned back to Ireland, and she came in and started working in the bakery doing front of house. My son, who was leaving cert student, he came in and did 2 days when he wasn't studying, and then I did the pastry, and then Derek did the baking, and we ran it like that for about 3 months. And that was really, like, it was really hard, because we were having to constantly, even though we were only open 3 days, we were still in there 5-6 days a week, and when I wasn't in there, we were doing books and whatever, which was quite hard. And my youngest child, who was only 13 at the time, she was very nervous, and she was afraid she didn't want to come in and be involved or whatever. But that initial period, that first period where we had the sunshine, and maybe people were going, well, this isn't going to last forever. And there was a kind of there was a really, I think it cemented the bakery's place in its place in Galway, in that people, we had queues around the block. There was a really good sense of community. People were out to support us. And I think that is the only way I kept my head up, to be honest with you, because if I had been at home then seeing, you know, rents building up that had to be paid and electricity bills to be paid, and not being able to go anywhere near them, I would have been seriously panicked.
And do you think that in that period, even though definitely people were very nervous and scared, there was kind of, the morale was actually quite positive, because there was that real sense of we're in this together at that time?
Absolutely. I think as a business owner, I think, you know, there's so many other things to think about with regards, you know, your tax bill and how are you going to, and then, you know, other things like personally, I had taken out a loan from the credit union to pay to have my tiles done in my kitchen. How am I going to pay for that? Like, I mean, it was just, my daughter had gone to America to study for a year. I'd taken out a loan for that. So just like, it really, I felt like I was drowning for a while, and that was really tough. You know, I have had mental health problems in the past, like, and I'm not ashamed to say that. I think a lot of people, you know, I think Eilis turned around and said there, you know, there's no shame involved. There's not. It's like, you know, if you have something wrong with your knee, you go to the doctor for it. Ireland has really dragged itself out of the dark ages with regards people's mental health, and the stigma that used to be attached. Somebody went to bed with their nerves or whatever. Oh, she was very nervy or whatever it was. You know, there's a lot of people now that are struggling, you know, and, you know, I even see it. I have 3 children, and, you know, we have brushed up against mental health issues, whether it's anxiety brought on by the whole coronavirus thing. A friend of my son's had committed suicide a year or so ago, and Zach suffered very badly after that, and attended off for a while as well. As Eilis had mentioned, they're an excellent, just because he was dealing with that. So I mean, this is something that is not even in the broad scope of like chefing and hospitality. I think it's really important that this stuff has come to absolutely to the fore in all aspects of Irish society.
Yeah, no, like absolutely. And Michelle, you actually just made the decision to retrain as a chef when you were 40, left the job in journalism, and then you've gone on since then to obviously train and work in the industry, but then to open 2 businesses of your own, which I just find it all incredibly brave. And I'm just wondering, like, aside from the last year, which obviously is just a total shit show, is it something that is it a decision that you've questioned at all? And I suppose in terms of your own, you know, talk about experience of mental health issues, like in terms of your own wellness, has it impacted on you negatively? Have there been positive things about it? What's your experience then?
I think there's, like any decision, like there's always going to be days when you feel like, shit, what the hell have I done? You know, this is crazy. Am I insane? But then the thing that always makes me, it's the people. It's the people. It's the young chefs who come in fresh from GMIT or on work experience, whatever it is. It's them. Like, I cannot tell you how much I miss the guys from the kitchen. Like, we're still in contact. We have our WhatsApp group, and we're kind of, you know, sending each other stupid memes about Trump or whatever it is anyway. And like, but like the chefs that work there, you know, particularly like Gavin Gleeson was with me for a very long time, and hopefully he'll be back with me again when we get the okay to open. And Heidi Duncan had been there with me front of house, Louise O'Neill. Like, these are people that I had worked with, Owen Fox, for a long time. Like, Gavin has been with me, I think, 6 or 7 years. And, you know, when you're working elbow to elbow with someone, Lalita Loughlin as well, you kind of know each other better than you know anyone else. Do you know what I mean? Because we spend so much time at work, and you become kind of it becomes all encompassing. That's one thing I think about chefs, that we do need to step back a tiny bit, because it can become, you know, it's all absorbing, you know. The one thing I have to say, actually, that's been good about the pandemic, And I know Barry kind of said it right at the beginning, being able to reconnect with his kids and everything. I had 10 days off over Christmas. I haven't had 10 days off over Christmas for years. And to have that time was unbelievable, actually, to be able to just light the fire. I drank probably the bottles of Baileys over the course of the 10 days. But you know what? I'm not a big drinker, so what? Don't call the police or anything. But just to be able to watch movies with the kids, light the fire, it was just gorgeous, you know. And it's those little moments of self-care, you know, lighting the fire, having a nice bloody bowl of stew, sitting, watching The Greatest Showman, whatever, you know, just being able to kind of hunker down with people you love has been a real salve for the soul, I think, during this whole epidemic or pandemic.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I'm going to quickly move on to talking to Eric Matthews. And of course, I'm spending longer than planned talking to everyone, so I'm running over time, of course, but hopefully we'll still have some time for questions. So Eric, if you want to pop your camera on.
Hello.
Hey. Hi,
Hello.
Eric. How are you?
Very good. First of all, thank you very much for asking me to be part of this. Very, very, very delighted to be here.
You're very welcome. It's really great to have you and to be able to talk to you. Eric, you're still a young man, but you said you've been working in kitchens for 16 years. Is that right?
16 years, yeah. I don't feel like that sometimes, but yeah.
Yeah. I think I knew you when you were
that's
very,
right.
Very young chef.
What was I, 18 at the time? Like that, Jesus.
Yeah, you must have been only about that. So yeah, and I was just kind of listening to what Michelle was saying there, and a couple of things she said reminded me of things that you had said when we were speaking the other day, which was like about the fact that, you know, as a chef, it can kind of become all-encompassing sometimes. And then, you know, heard Michelle talking about that time of Christmas and how precious that is. Like, do you see that as, I mean, for you personally in your career and your experience of being in the industry, do you see that as a big issue, getting that balance and having those moments, you know, away from it all?
I know you know my story and where I've trained and all that, but I mean, I'll give you kind of a background to understand how this has kind of affected me in a sense. Like, as you know, but I'm sure anybody who's listening, like I trained in so many restaurants, most of the Michelin star restaurants, and you know, it is phenomenal in the last 16 years how it's changed. You know, Barry talked about different kinds of environments and different types of atmosphere and, you know, substance abuse and drinking. Now luckily, I wasn't really exposed to too much of that, because places like with Michelin star restaurants, like, you can't, you know, it's not really, you wouldn't be able to get up at 6:30 in the morning and work until midnight if you were completely drained out having drinks or whatever. So for me, you know, my kind of journey, you know, it's been a very disciplined road, you know, and that does affect a lot of people in different ways. You know, I like to think I'm very positive, you know, whatever happens, I kind of compartmentalize problems and kind of, you know, deal with them one, you know, roll one into the other and not try and get overwhelmed by things, you know. So from all the restaurants that I worked in, you know, from 1-star, 2-star, 3-star places, I think it might have enabled me to kind of deal with things in a kind of a more systematic way, if that makes any sense. Okay, so you know, when you're running on 100% pretty much for 16 years, for this to happen, you know, it is mad, like, it is incredible. But as Michelle said there, and even Barry, you know, having time, you know, it's strange. Like Michelle was saying, she's had time with her kids, you know, 10 days off, Christmas time. Barry saying getting to know his kids, which is beautiful. For me, actually, I got to spend a lot of time with my family. Now, obviously, I have a funny photo on my phone. We would go to my dad's back garden, obviously when we were allowed to go and meet up in the summer. And there's a picture of us all 2 meters apart, sitting at his back wall. And we have it framed. And it'll be one of those pictures in 100 years' time, when people talk about, you know, the Spanish flu back in 1917, they'll talk about this and go, Jesus, do you remember that? You know, like, there are the things that I think about, you know, the most. Obviously, you know, I've tried to make the most out of the time that I've had. You know, I'm not the kind of person that kind of sits and dwells on things. Like, you know, personally, as I said to you, and I've no problem saying it, my best friend died of COVID in March. You know, and that was very upsetting for me, because, you know, at first when it first happened, everybody thought like, Jesus, it's a flu and this is mad and what's going to happen. And then to get you know, you're on a group text with my friends, and to just start to see the messages. And what was really sad was he was in the group saying, geez, I don't feel great. No, I have a headache and I'm vomiting and I can't. And then it just progressed. So that really hit me, and it really made me think, Jesus, this is like, wow, this is like, you know, a historical moment in the world that, you know, everybody's going to be so hugely affected by it. You know, everybody's story that we've listened to for the last 50 minutes, everybody's affected by it differently, you know, and that's the thing about it. It's universal. Everybody has their own stories. You know, I kind of think about it, you know, it was difficult for us when we first came back after the first lockdown, because obviously, you know, in chapter one, it's you know, people's expectations are so high, and our commitment to what we do is what we're about. You know, it's we train our staff so much, and we listen to them so much, that when you come back and you can't operate the same way, not the same amount of customers, even the interaction with the customers is kind of gone. We really enjoy knowing the customers, and such and such is on table 15 tonight, and so on and so forth. And then in the kitchen, you know, the atmosphere, we would have nearly 15 staff, and because of restrictions, that number had to come down slightly, which is not great. Now, you know, luckily Ross has a sister restaurant, and, you know, chefs are all friends, and nobody went out of work, but people weren't able to come back, and that's very sad, because, you know, we spend so long training staff. You know, every Tuesday or every second Tuesday, we'll get everybody in an hour early if they want to. Now, it's not mandatory, but they can come in and they can learn something, whether it's chocolate with Stan, whether it's butchery with me, or my butcher, or fish, or, you know, making sauces. And when you put that level of commitment into training your staff, and then all of a sudden you don't see them for 4, 5, 6 months, it's difficult. Like we had you know, we had a WhatsApp group that was quite useful. You know, whether it was a stupid picture of a monkey farting, it was still something that everybody could kind of go, okay, right, yeah, you know. On a personal level, you know, myself and my now fiance started something that was for my own mental health very, very positive and very kind of fulfilling. Basically it's a kind of a cooking show, but it's more of a kind of, they're cooking lessons. Like, we don't charge anybody. It's just a bit of crack. We want people to enjoy cooking. And if you're stuck at home as well, you know, like, the panel is full of chefs, full of knowledge, and we're all doing the same thing. It's lovely to hear about Barry's daughter, Nora, on food. Like, these things are brilliant, you know, they're morale boosting. And if they give you a purpose as well, and if, you know, you're worried about your business, as Michelle said, and you're worried about, you know, loans that are outstanding, and you're paying for your kids' college education, these things compound, and they really do affect you. And having panels like this they're really amazing, because, you know, it's like my mother, actually, right? I was on the phone for the other day. My grandmother went into hospital a couple of days ago. Now, she's fine, everything's okay, she's home now. But my mother and myself, our relationship is so good at the moment. Like, for years, you know, as a chef, you're kind of working, and you kind of neglect people. And I would admit I was not the best at keeping in touch, because I'm just working. This year has enabled me to really, really identify, you know what, I love chatting to my mum now. I love ringing her. I love hearing about what's going on. And she didn't ring me for 2 days because she was trying to deal with this problem with her mother. And, you know, just speaking to her kind of helped her go, oh, do you know what? It's not that stressful. Okay, yeah. And I think having panels like this and communicating, like Eilis said, like, if you've got demons in your head and there's something that's, you know, talking to people really is sometimes the best medicine. And it's, you know, it's universal as well. Everybody deals with these problems. But to quote you, Ruth, this year, yes, was an absolute shit show, and hopefully it gets better.
Yeah, hopefully. And like, thank you so much for sharing all of that, Eric. And I'm really, really sorry to hear about your friend. And like, I think, Jesus. Yeah, and if that doesn't put things in perspective, like, and I think that's, it's a bit of a cliche, but I think that is one thing about all of this, the pandemic and everything, and what you're saying about just how precious it is to have that relationship with your mother, or, all of that. I mean, it really has hopefully given us perspective. And I mean, as a chef, I just wonder, how important do you think that is? Because you spoke when we were speaking the other day about, how much you can kind of get lost in it and absorbed by it. And like, sometimes maybe it's like you can lose perspective.
I mean, the thing is, right, it's funny. I must thank Ross for this, because he's helped me grow as not just a chef, but as kind of a leader, a manager, a human being, maybe. I came back from London, and I suppose maybe I was slightly brainwashed into their way of how to operate. Very kind of, this is the way it is. There's no reason, like, why are you making it like that? Because that's the way we make it. So just do it. And I think I'll admit, my style of management the first 2 years was very kind of, that's how we're doing it. Like the blinkers were on. And it wasn't the right way to do it. Listening to your staff. People want to be listened to. They want to be motivated, but they also want to be listened to. Because if people feel like when you talk, you appreciate them and you value their input, then it also makes it easier to discipline people when they make a mistake. We have a saying, if you catch somebody doing something wrong, make sure you catch them doing something right. A big help for me, I'll admit it here, I started to listen to sleep hypnosis 4 years ago. Right? Because I was kind of in a funk where, you're working 15 hours a day. This is before I think I actually didn't mention, we changed our hours in chapter 1 for the very reason of giving people slightly more time for themselves, for their mental health. People have their family they want to see. It was quite funny. Myself and Ross were actually in a tapas bar in Barcelona, and it was kind of one of those things, with a few beers, we were having a few bit of food, and we just said, do you know what? Wouldn't it be great to have more time to do things like this? And that's where kind of the idea starts to come from. And it gave us a tremendous boost for our staff in terms of staff turnover. People before would do their 1 year in chapter 1 and it's tick the box. The box is ticked. I've worked there. I can leave. But I always feel you don't really get enough out of something until you're there for 2 years, maybe 3 years to really get into it. So I know you're looking at the time as well. I won't ramble on too much, but having the time and giving people time back really, really is beneficial for any business. You don't dread coming into work. You're looking forward to it because you're thinking, geez, today we're doing this and we're going to learn this, and what we got booked today, or we're changing the menu. Like, changing the menu for us is one of the best things. I used to get quite stressed about it because we have to change so much and our menu is quite large. And the level of perfection that we're aiming for, it can be stressful. I'm not going to lie. There are parts where, like, we don't have a development chef where we spend 3 months working on a dish. It is concepted. The concept comes from myself. We sit down. We talk to Ross. What do you think? Myself, my sous chef sit down. We mill out what we're going to do, and then the whole team gets involved. What about this? What about that? What about this? And then we taste it about 20 times. And then if it works, it goes on the menu. And if it doesn't, it's been an interesting process. But that's, it allows the whole team to be part of it.
Good stuff. And I should mention that separately, I'm going to have a conversation next Thursday with Ross Lewis. So we'll definitely talk in a lot more detail about all those changes that you've made in terms of kind of rostering and giving people that work-life balance, and I suppose how you recognise why that needed to happen as well, and what that has meant for the team. Eric, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us.
Pleasure.
We've almost run out of time. I'm going to ask everybody to come back for the last few minutes, and we might just go a little bit over time. I'm conscious that people may need to leave the webinar at 12, which is fine if you do. Thanks so much, everyone. So I have a question here. Just when a chef is joining the call, just talking about the difficulty of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in particular the kind of shutdowns and reopenings, and the lack of certainty about how long you'd be open for, and saying that they found it quite hard to get staff back from furlough, and also that when staff came back that they weren't very motivated. So I'm just wondering, I don't know if anyone, you can just put up your hand, anyone wants to answer that, if you had, like, how you maybe dealt with that, or if you had that experience. Eric, was that it? Yeah. Go ahead.
You know, you would think, you know, it would be easy for us to just kind of come back in, but I think finding staff, it wasn't so much the chefs that I found is the hardest. It was a lot of our kitchen porters, and they're kind of forgotten a lot. Everybody talks about chefs, the chefs. Like, if I didn't have a kitchen porter, I'd be completely screwed, if you don't mind me saying. And we have a team of 4 kitchen porters. And, you know, some of them would be students who were only able to work a certain amount of time. And then some of them went home. And not a lot of people want to do that. And it is quite stressful, because we're such a large operation, and we've got 2 kitchen porter areas, and there's a massive building to clean as well. So, you know, it was something that I found, and even every time we came back after lockdown, it was finding, you know, we had one kitchen porter who's been with us for 15 years, but kind of getting people who want to do it, because it's very difficult. And I don't know if everybody else feels the same. You know, getting chefs is hard enough, but getting the people who do the really hard work, that's very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just wondering as well, at this point, with, you know, all the kind of closures, and particularly I think with like the short notice that was given for closures and all of that, you know, how do people feel, you know, what do people feel is the sentiment amongst the chef profession now, and the kind of morale in the hospitality industry overall, and maybe how that might be impacting on people then in terms of their mental health individually? Does anyone want to come in on that? Michelle?
I think some of I think it's a lot of it is down to your personality anyway. So there's some people that just don't do well spending a lot of time alone or with their partner and kids or whatever it is. But the people who've been active, you know, the ones who've been interested in going out and walking and staying in touch on the phone, they tend to be doing a little bit better, I think. I just want to come back to one thing you asked just a second ago about getting people back. Now, this is something I think I might bring up, something that people aren't crazy about talking about. And I know the PUP has been great, as I said earlier, it's been amazing, you know, especially with people that were earning a little bit more money. But there has been a bit of an issue with some of the younger workers who were maybe only working 2 days a week, and they were able to claim the PUP, the full PUP, and they're very hesitant to come back to work, probably because they'll be earning less. This is something that I've spoken to a lot of my chef mates about in Galway, and we're all kind of seeing a little bit of it. You know, I'm never going to be someone who's going to rat somebody out to revenue or whatever about it, but I've had 2 people who haven't wanted to come back because of that, which is kind of...
Yeah, I've heard a lot of that as well, yeah.
And it's
difficult,
kind of
very tricky.
Talk about, because, you know, you want to be fair to people, you want to give them the right, you want to give them their, you know, the right pay for the job that they're doing. But I mean, if they're only working a couple of days a week, you know, they're not going to be earning 350 euros. So then they don't want to come back to work. So this has also been something I think, and I think when we're coming out of this is going to be a real battle.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose I'd like to kind of maybe wrap up, because we are out of time, by just going to each of you very briefly, just I suppose to ask, based on your own experiences, you know, what you think are one or two of the key things that chefs can do to take care of themselves, either in the current situation or just in general in their careers, or how best they can kind of look out for their team as well in regards to mental health. So just sort of one line from everybody before we wrap up. And sorry for going so over time. I'm talking to you individually. And sorry for not having a bit more time for questions, but a huge thank you to you all for taking part. Eilis, I'll go to you first because you wanted to come in there.
Yeah, I'm happy enough to come in there. So I use an app. It's called Headspace. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it. It just teaches you, it's like an easy way of meditating or using mindfulness, and it's a practice more so. Like it's some people when you mention meditation or mindfulness are like, here's your one over there. But it's very, very easy to use, and it's just 10 minutes every day. And I'm using it so long now that I'm at a point where like I could be walking in the park with the baby's buggy, and I'll just automatically just use the practice myself. I've got so accustomed to doing it, and if I find myself I'm anxious or I'm in, like I could be anywhere, I could be in a busy place and I find myself getting a little bit anxious or a little bit uptight, I'm able to just turn that on straight away. It's called a body scan. I don't know if anyone else has ever heard of it. It's just a type of meditating, and if you put it into YouTube, you'll find it. I find that really, really useful.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Eilis. Eric?
Very simple. Listen to loads of music. Exercise. I try and get out and I'm not boasting, but just get out and do as much running as you can. Exercise, get out, walk, and for the love of God, make sure you communicate to people, because I think Eilis said it as well. You know, you can come into work some days and you can see that somebody has clearly had either a rough night or they're not at 100%. You know, and my advice to anybody, whether you're the boss at the very top or you're the lowest of the low, speak to somebody, talk to somebody. It really is helpful to say, like, I've a sous chef and I've Ross, and I could go, let's have a chat and say, do you know what, I feel a bit shit, or, you know, something's bothering me. Just say it. It's like bursting a pimple. Just bloody say, talk to people. You'll feel so much better. And yeah,
Thanks,
listen
Eric.
to some music and maybe have a nice glass of wine, but not too much. Just one.
Perfect. Paula?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Eric. Talk to people, you know. There's so many people around you, and you know, it makes such a difference. And I swear by exercising, getting outside, you don't have to go running, you can walk too, you know. And I know the weather is crap in Ireland, but everybody has rain jackets, so you can still go outside every day.
Yeah. Definitely, weather is no excuse. Michelle?
No.
Yeah, just I guess the same, fresh air, and keep the lines of communication open. No matter how alone you feel, you're not really. And you know, if you do feel someone is struggling, just keep them in the loop and just open the lines of communication and see how it goes. And for yourself, I mean, I do things like play. I mean, I have my little dogs I'm crazy about. I have a glass of wine or two, Eric, the odd time. I've learned to make an unbelievable margarita, which I'll only have one of, but that's pretty good. And, you know, doing things like teaching the kids. We had taco night last week. We made tacos and I had a margarita. I light a nice candle if I want. You know, just self-care and be kind. Be kind to people, because whatever you put out there always comes back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Be kind to people and be kind to yourself. I think a lot of us forget that bit as well. Barry, we'll finish up with you. Words of wisdom.
I suppose, yeah, just take time for yourself, you know, like Eric said, like Paula said, you know, exercise, fresh air, you know, it solves a lot of problems. I suppose stop putting so much pressure on yourself with regards looking at other people's social media accounts and food and thinking this is what you should be doing. No, do what makes you happy, you know, cook the food you want to cook. You know, and I suppose it's just, you know, I often thought, like, you know, I was driven by success, I was driven by money, you know, but money won't make you happy, you know. It's surrounding yourself with good people, you know, being able to talk, being able to open up and just relax and enjoy life and stop, you know, giving yourself such a hard time all the time.
Brilliant, guys. Incredible. Thank you so much to all of you, Eric, Eilis, Paula, Michelle, and Barry, for speaking to us this morning. Really, really appreciate your time. As I mentioned earlier, I will be doing a conversation with Ross Lewis at the same time next Thursday, and really looking forward to hearing his insights over his career. And we also, the following Thursday, have a talk on nutrition and mental health, which I think should be really interesting for chefs as well. Chefs not always the best at looking after what they eat themselves and their own nutrition. So that's really interesting. And speaking about the mindfulness techniques and all of that, I believe we are going to have a Chef Network member who is also a qualified yoga teacher who's going to offer a free Zoom yoga class tailored for chefs, so that's one to look out for as well. And finally, just to mention that, of course, Chef Network worked on the Kitchen Workplace Charter a couple of years ago, which was developed by chefs in the industry, and has 5 quite simple principles, but lots of examples behind it. And it's really just there as some guidance, and it really fits in with all of this around mental health and work-life balance. So if you haven't checked that out, do check it out, and make sure that your team understand that that's the kind of culture that you want to create in your kitchen. My apologies for going over time. I think we could have talked for another hour at least and more. But again, a huge thank you to all the participants, and thank you to BWG for their support for this month of Mind Your Mind. Thanks a million, guys.
Thanks.
Thank
See
you.
ya. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.